Welcome back to the Patriots Report, part of the Believe Network presented by FanDuel. My name is Christopher Price, the Boston Globe and BostonGlobe.com, joined as always by my podcast partner, two-time Super Bowl champion Chris Hogan. Okay, Chris, a lot to unpack from the first night of the draft, and not all of it, let's just say not all of it's draft related. Let's start there. So
it's never a dull moment.
Exactly. I was talking with someone involved with the Patriots the other day, and I said, you guys make just enough news on a consistent basis to keep hacks like me in a job. So, God bless him for that. I want to get your take on what's been happening with Mike Vrabel.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of conversation, and we can come at it from a lot of different angles, but I wanted to get your opinion on this. There's a lot of talk up here about Mike needs to connect with the locker room again and kind of make peace with the locker room because, on the wall, the players' meeting room, one of the four things that he hits on all the time is make great decisions. And we're starting to learn more and more that Mike Vrabel has not made some great decisions, specifically off the field over the last few months. So I'm curious from your perspective. You played for a lot of different coaches who made some noise away from the field. Not like this, but look, you played for Rex Ryan. You played for Bill Belichick. You played for some other guys. Does it matter to you as a player when a coach makes headlines off the field?
Think about this. The fact that you have a guy that, here's what I'll say, right? Bill used to always say, check your shit at the door, right? Whatever you have going on outside your life, you always check it at the door. You don't bring it in. We're here to do a job. We're here to win football games. What you have going on in your outside life, that has nothing to do with you as a football player, right? And your ability to do your job and coming in and holding yourself accountable and, being a professional and doing what you need to do. And then, when you exit the building, then things change, right? You have family, friends, you have lots of things going on, and everyone has a lot going on in their lives. And, that's not for us to really know about, or unless they disclose that information to us, right? Secondly, everyone makes mistakes. It's part of life. I would say, like, in this scenario, and I don't know, and I'm not gonna guess or understand what really happened. I don't know. Like, that's not for me to know, and it's not for really any of us to know, right? That's his private life and outside of football. And I think if he's in the locker room preaching one thing about, he's not talking to these guys about marriage and being fit. Like, that's not what he's talking about, right? He's talking about making good decisions on the football field. And I think a part of that is obviously translates to off the field as well. That doesn't put you in a bad situation where you're going to get in trouble with the NFL and you're not going to be able to play this game and you're not going to get paid. And there are a lot of decisions here that, that for a lot of guys to be made that could be far worse than, allegedly what, Mike has where he's at today. Right. I think what we do know is that Mike cares very deeply about this team. He cares deeply about the players. If I was in that locker room, I don't need to hear it. All I want to know is what are we doing to get better next season? He can approach the team and he could talk about it and be like, hey guys, listen, you saw it. I made a decision. It's really not for me to talk to you guys about. I just want you to know that it's not going to affect me as a head coach. It's not going to affect me and my day-to-day, duties as your head coach. I'm going to continue going forward. Our goal is obviously to get back to the Super Bowl, and we're going to put the best team forward. And okay, cool, moving on, bro. Like, what's week one install? What are we doing today? Right? I don't think it's really the locker room. To me, this should not be concerning, right? Unless he gives them a reason for concern. If he's we said it before we got on here. It's like, what if he took a month off or he took 2 months off? Now you're sitting back as a player and you're like, well, like, how bad is this situation? It's like, are we going to rehab or is there a bigger problem here than like not being talked about? But, he addressed it. I think he was very honest and truthful with his players, and I think that's all that needs to be said. And I think that if you're a player that's played for him now for a year, I would guess that you have the utmost faith and trust in your head coach, right? To try to make the right decisions for your football team. It has not yet, his family life has nothing to do with your football team. Right. And at the end of the day, like, I hate to just like separate the two. I'm not saying we don't care about family because, like, listen, like, family came first for me always. And then it was football. And I think that's probably like maybe the priorities got a little mixed up. Like, who's to know? I don't know. I don't really care. It's not for me. All I want to know is that he's going to take ownership of whatever's going on, which he has. And this can be a problem that Mike handles privately with his family. And then we can get back to talking about football. Right. It's like, as a player, I'm not really concerned about it, unless you got your head coach going out and like freaking, I don't know, doing some crazy shit. Like, then you just, what are we really talking about? Like, he's been there. Guy took some time off. He did whatever. And I'm sure that he's been like biting at his fingertips, right? And to get back into the season, get into this draft and get ready, get this football team prepared to take on a very big challenge, I would say, for this year. Much bigger, I would say even bigger than last year.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that there's gonna be some time and some for him to probably just kind of figure this whole situation out from him privately. But I would imagine that this does not affect his ability to coach the New England Patriots and to coach them as effectively and as well as he has done. And if I'm a player being coached by him, all I want to know is, what are we doing to get better? Right? We're not coming in here and having therapy sessions and talking about, like, we're not doing that. Like, we're talking about who's our opponent, what are we doing, what's changing this year, how are we going to get better. We got OTAs, then we got mini camp, then we got a month off, then we go to training camp. Like, that is gonna be, bro, season's gonna be here so that's what I'm concerned. That's what I'm thinking about as a player. I've been around plenty of guys that have made poor choices off the field. I'm not poor. They made mistakes, right? They made a mistake, or they did something here, did something there. And guess what? They came into the locker room and they handled their business, right? And they went about, like, yeah, sure. Maybe you could tell it was on their minds, right? But they also went out to practice. They practiced well. They performed well. They went out to the game well. And then they had to leave and obviously handle whatever was going on in their personal lives. But for the guys, the professionals, the true professionals in this league that are able to kind of separate, the two, right? And to come into the locker room, get what you have to get done, right? And then go home and handle it, right? You're not sitting here writing about what's going on in your family life, right? Like, you're writing about, like, your job, and you're doing your job and everything that's current and everything that's going on in sports. And then, like, no one needs to know about that. Again, I think that professional athletes in general are underneath the microscope. And I think that people see these men and women, and they're at the highest peak level of athleticism, and they've reached the highest level, and it's just like, okay, well, these people, they don't make mistakes, right? Well, no, man, like, they're just like everybody else. They make mistakes. They have to learn from them. They have to own it, and then they have to go do their job. That's life, right? And I think Mike's handled it in the best way that he can. And, like, to me, like, let's go. Moving on. Like, who are we taking in round 2 and 3? Twin.
Hearing you talk about this and texting with some current and former players, the vibe I get is, look, I just want to keep my own little corner of the world evergreen. Right. I want to take care of my business. I'm not going to worry about what the guy next to me is doing. I'm not going to worry about what my head coach is doing. I'm going to keep the train on the track. My own personal goal is to continue to get better. And if there are distractions, you deal with the distractions and you keep moving forward. The other thing is, and I'm curious to get one more thing on this before we move on. Are you concerned at all about this becoming a potential distraction within the team, within the front office, within the franchise, whatever the case may be? I've done a lot of out-of-market radio. with, over the course of the last couple of weeks. And I've got this question, regarding Vrabel an awful lot. Is this going to be a distraction? And I say, chances are good it's not going to be a distraction because it's about timing in this case.
Yeah.
Remember last March when Steph Diggs was on the boat with the pink powder?
What boat?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. If this happened during the regular season, if these photographs came out and they were on the bye week and they just lost 2 of 3 to the Bills and the Seahawks and they were struggling in the AFC East, then I think this would be a Category 5 bleep storm.
Totally.
But I think that where we sit right now, the halfway point of the offseason, this is not, I'm not going to say it's going to be forgotten come the regular season, come training camp, but I think the chances are good because of when it happened, because of when the news broke, that this is not going to be a long-term distraction for this franchise.
No, I don't. And listen, Stacy and the PR team over there are going to do a great job. And I think, yes, is Mike going to get questions about this for the next month or so? 100%. He is. But he's also, I think he could just, again, he doesn't have to answer anything about his private life. It's hey, listen, this is what it is. If you want, let's talk football, right? I'm dealing with what's going on off the field myself. That's not something that you guys need to know about. And that's it. Right. And then from a player perspective, they're going to get asked too. Is this a distraction? What do you think, your head coach? Well, guess what? Here's your media training. You talk about you, yourself, the team, and nothing else. And if you have a question about Mike Vrabel, then I'll deflect. Go ask my head coach. All right. That was the best thing that Bill ever told his guys when we were there. Right. And I never was told that. You get a bunch of media training and, think before you speak and think before you tweet and all these different things. But Bill, the way that we broke it down in New England was very simple. You talk about yourself, you can talk about the team, and if there's a question that you're uncomfortable with, or there's something that you feel like you shouldn't answer, you just be like, please ask Bill. Right? I'm not comfortable asking that question. That's a totally fine response. Ask my head coach. I think that he'll be able to answer that more appropriately, or in a better way that doesn't make me look like an ass or I say the wrong thing, right? You never talk about injuries. You never talk about all this kind of stuff. So as a player, hey, your head coach made some headlines this year, in the offseason. So what do you think about that? Is that going to affect the 2027 season? And is this are the guys in the locker room? I'm focused on myself, right? I'm focused on getting better for this season. I'm focused on the team and what we have, the challenge and bringing the new guys in here and getting them up to speed and being a professional and showing up each and every day, trying to work hard and get ourselves back to a championship. And anything else that you have to talk about Mike, you can ask Mike. Boom. There you go. Record, send to Stacy, and play that on loop.
Best example of that, quick side story, of speaking for yourself was in the summer of 2007. I talked to Brandon Merriweather. In Brandon Merriweather, I asked him about what it's like being in here with all of these veterans and being a part of this team and how excited he was. And he talked about Wes Welker and about how he's learning everything from Wes Welker. And Wes Welker is such a great teacher, and he's getting this down and getting on his P's and Q's and getting in his playbook and talking about how great Welker is. Fast forward to 10 days later, I find out that Bill puts that quote on the board in the team meeting and says, what do you effing know at this stage of your career? You shouldn't say shit. Who are you to talk about Wes Welker? Yeah. So it's just, that's the best example of media training in action, that players are best served, at least in this case, if you're in that locker room, speak for yourself. And we heard that from a lot of guys last year. And I think that's going to be the MO moving forward, especially when it comes to this. Again, I think for me, from a player's perspective, it feels like, look, I'm just going to take care of my business. Mike is going through what he's going through. The guys who like him are going to continue to like him and play hard for him. And the guys who are, I don't know, I'm not too sure about him, are going to feel the same way. And nothing is going to change moving forward. Yeah.
At the end of the day, your job depends on it. So if you're coming in here and just, you feel a certain type of way about something, that's your decision. But your job is to come in here and perform and play football for this team and help them win football games. It's not to co-counsel through whatever the hell is going on, right? That's not your job.
All right, let's move on to the draft, and specifically the Patriots. They moved up from 31 to 28 to take left tackle, Caleb
Left
Lomu,
tackle.
left tackle, which
Left.
is really interesting
Message.
on a number of levels. And we talked to Elliott after the draft last night, and he said, well, maybe he moves to guard. We feel confident about him at left tackle. So look, this begs the question, and I go back to my favorite Vrabelism that we've talked about time and again, where we asked him when he was a player, he said, do you watch the draft? He says, look, I watch the draft every year because I want to know who they're trying to replace me with.
Yeah.
They draft a left tackle coming off the Super Bowl. Should Will Campbell be concerned? Should he be worried? Or is this a guy who is going to be a backup swing tackle this year? Because look, I love Morgan Moses, but Morgan Moses ain't playing 20 games at the age of 35.
Yeah.
And eventually stepping in at right tackle for Morgan Moses, is he going to be competition for Will Campbell at left tackle? Do they move Will Campbell into left guard? What's the path forward here for this young man who was taken in the first round last night by the New England Patriots?
I think that they drafted the best available player at that position that they wanted to get into the locker room. They obviously liked the kid, and I'm sure they met with him. Big frame, big body. And yeah, I mean, I think it's competition, right? Who knows what's going to happen in the one, that you laid out. Could he be a swing tackle? Could he be a guy that kind of just steps in here and there? Like, sure. Right. But I think initially, like, this kid is going to come in and he's going to try to play football. Right. And I think if you're Will Campbell, this is not like I'm going to get all pissed off at the world. Like, well, maybe I used to get pissed when they took receivers. Right.
I will say this, but before we continue, Will Campbell apparently was the first guy to text him last night.
I'm sure he was, because
welcome to the team. We're excited to have you.
Yeah. That's his personality, right? The kid loves football. He wants to win. So guess what? If they ask him to move to right guard, the kid's probably he's not going to say a thing, right? He's going to go play right guard in the best way that he can, run through walls and die for his quarterback and all the stuff that he talks about. But yeah, I think it's like, yeah, all right, listen, we need offensive linemen, right? That was a position of need for us to kind of bulk that up and ensure that we're protecting our star quarterback, right? The guy that we're going to franchise type player, the guy that was runner-up in the MVP standings last year. I mean, that's an important position that we're going to want to try to do whatever we can to protect. And if that's a left tackle, and if this kid comes in and he's outplaying Will Campbell, then I'm putting this Caleb
Lomu.
I'm putting Caleb at left tackle, right? And that. Like, so for Will, it's like, okay, cool. They're bringing in competition. Like, your job is never safe in the NFL. It's never safe. And I think for Will, I think that he knows that there's a lot of areas for him to improve on. And that's all that it is. It's like, you're going to come ready to go during this offseason period, put in the work that you can. And then when the pads come on, right? Like, that's when we're going to figure it out. And I'm sure there might be some, they might play around with it, right? Like, why would you not, right? You drafted the kid in the first round. Like, let's put him at left tackle and move Will inside to left guard, left tackle, left guard, right? Like, let's see what that looks like, right? Or let's keep Will at left and Moses on right, and let's put the big kid inside and see if he can play right guard or left guard next to one of these. So I think that there's going to be, and I guarantee you they're probably going to pick up another offensive guard position or guard tackle, offensive lineman. And there's there's period of time in the offseason where you just, you kind of figure out what works, right? You try what are the 5-6 guys that we can put on the offensive line together? They're going to communicate well. They're going to play well, and they're going to be able to do the best job in the run game and then in pass protection. So the kid was, I saw the stats, right? He didn't give up a lot of sacks, but the school that he played for was a heavy RPO team, and balls in and out of the quarterback's hands. So, and he's not going against NFL type caliber players every single down. So that always has, you always have to think about that, right? When you come into the NFL, it's a different level, right? It's a different level of competition when you got, Myles Garrett, rushing off the edge every single play, trying to get to the quarterback and break his damn sack record this year. Like, that's a problem. So I think there's still a lot to be seen and a lot to learn about this kid. And I love the competition factor. I think that it will level up this offensive line that much more. I think it'll level up Will. I think it kind of kicks, lights a little bit more of a fire underneath him. And, it's forget about last year, forget about anything else that happened. You had a successful first year, you got a little bit injured and had a tough last couple of games. Moving on, right? What have you done for me lately, right? And that's right now we're in the off season. So yeah, we haven't played a single game in 2027, right? Not a single one. So who cares? Like approach it like that. Brand new season. Welcome the kid in, teach him, because guess what? He's a part of your football team. He's not going anywhere. He's a first rounder. He's going to be here for at least 3 years, right? Like that's the reality of it.
He's just 21. He's 21.
I mean, he's a young kid. You're young, so like this is not a situation. I never felt that way about guys either. Like, yeah, I always approached every single year saying, okay, I'm either keeping my job or taking somebody else's. But I never I was always friendly with everyone. I always because you're with them, right? You're working together as a unit and as a team or as a position group. So whatever you can do to get each other better, like whatever happens at the end of the day happens, right? But that's based off of your performance in games and practice and showing up and being professional. So this kid has a lot to learn in the NFL. Like Will Campbell can certainly help him. Morgan Moses can certainly help him. And what happens, once the pads come on and where, the chips fall on the offensive line, like we don't know yet, right? I think but to me, I'm trying to protect Drake as much as humanly possible and give him the best chance to be successful with a really good offensive line.
I'm just trying to sit here and think about, let's say, the first week or so into camp, and we've got the binoculars sitting up on the hill like this, and we see Lomu at left tackle and Campbell at left guard, and we all start
the center's in the backfield.
Yeah, it's like
they're standing around.
But it's all of us sitting up on the hill just tweeting breathlessly about how Caleb Lomu is going to take Will Campbell's job. So, who he kind of reminds me of a little bit physically? Guy you played with, Nate Solder.
Yeah, he's a big dude, right?
Taller, 6'6", but a little leaner. Not like a Sebastian Vollmer type, but like a Nate Solder, kind of a taller, leaner guy. It's going to be interesting to see how it all kind of plays out. I think the body type doesn't necessarily scream guard.
It doesn't.
Elliott kind of talked last night about how, maybe he'll play guard. And God bless him, the kid was just like, I'll play wherever they want me to play.
Yeah.
I'm just excited to get the opportunity. He reminds me a little bit, his personality reminds me a little bit of Gronk.
Oh, God.
Just kind of a goofy earnestness who's just like, absolutely, I'm ready to go. I'm excited.
Yeah.
And part of that, look, I get part of that is just kind of being a rookie in the NFL and just not knowing what you don't know yet. But there is a level of earnestness to him and a level of, dare I say, sweetness, at least initially what we saw last night, that reminds me of Gronk just a little bit.
I'm okay. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
That's good. If that translates to really good football, then
exactly.
we're good with it.
Exactly. And being a positive guy in the locker room. I mean, you know this too. I don't think Gronk ever had a bad day. If Caleb Lomu is like that,
never.
I think that adds to the general feeling, the general feeling of positivity in the locker room. Was there anything about the draft last night that surprised you? I think, before we came on here, I think we were both surprised. The biggest surprise was Tai Simpson to the Rams at 13, which really, look, McVay and quarterbacks, I mean, that could be an absolute genius move at the end.
Yeah, but, I mean, what do we know, right?
But I mean, at the end of the day, the Rams are in a win now mode. Their championship window is there. And to use your 13th overall pick on a guy who is at least theoretically going to be your next quarterback, whether it's in 2027, 2028, or whatever, depending on how long Matthew Stafford hangs around, it was an odd choice.
Yeah.
It was an odd choice.
Yeah, I didn't totally understand it, but, that's why I'm not a general manager of a football team. You have the league MVP as your quarterback, and it seems like, like you said, the Rams, this is a win now type of situation. That window of opportunity to be one of the better teams in the NFL, like it's not going to be around for forever. You have Puka with all the offseason stuff that's going on with him, and Matthew, who's he's gonna continue to play at a very high level, clearly, but for how much longer, like, we don't know. So it seems like a skill position might have been something that they would have gone with, and there was plenty of guys on the board that they could have taken, but I guess they felt like this was the best player in out of all the positions that they could draft, and that was a little bit odd to me. But again, McVay and these guys, these offensive minded coaches, man, you never know what's going on. They have like this ultimate plan, and he's probably drawn up plays for 2 quarterback type situations that he just wanted this kid in there. Like, who knows? That was weird. I mean, the Giants leaving Josh Downs on the table and not drafting him and taking a couple other guys. Like, it's just, the draft is it's so heavily scrutinized, right? On the decisions that you make, and you only get a handful of them. And like, the fans are either going to be rejoicing that you drafted a player that you watched through the draft process on, ESPN, and you read about them and all the analysts, or you're going to be pissed off because you got, they took a guy that you've never heard of before. So it's like, at the end of the day, I think that most teams are going to try to fulfill the needs that they need. And like, there's a process that they go through, and, you hope that these are all good decisions, and that these players are going to turn out to be great players, right? And it's like, we don't know until the pads come on, they actually get out there and start playing football. So we can talk about everything that we want to. It's like, yeah, they were, all these kids were great college players. That's why they got drafted in the first round. And that same thing with the kids in the second and third rounds. But once the pads come on, it's like, okay, like, what do we really have here? So we'll see.
You talk about making the knee-jerk reactions to, and this is probably one of the least favorite things about my job. I love breaking down prospects, and I love kind of figuring out who might fit where and why, and kind of all the different permutations there. But we have to do instantaneous draft grades, and I wrote at like midnight last night a whole list of winners and losers from the draft, and I went back and I looked at my winners and losers from the last couple of years. They didn't match up. It's just you don't know in that moment.
Yeah.
You, from a journalism perspective, you kind of have to feed the beast, and it's all part of the conversation. And I get that. One of my winners from last night, though, was a guy that you know pretty well, at Matt Patricia, the defensive coordinator at Ohio State. 3 guys taken
in the top 5, right? Or top 10, or
in the top 11, I think it was, with 11. Caleb Downs going number 11, Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles, and Caleb Downs going in the top 11. I love Sonny Styles. And he reminds me of one of your former teammates in Dante Hightower.
Oof, that's a great comparison.
An absolutely, not so much from like a playing perspective, but a guy who, his attitude, his temperament, the way he carries himself, the professionalism that he exhibits at a really early age, that's a guy who's going to have a green dot in the back of his helmet within like 18 months.
Yeah.
He just, and I think Washington, that pick specifically at, I think it was 7, absolutely crushed it with a guy like Sonny Styles. But to a larger point is that Patricia had 3 guys taken off that defense in the top 11.
I mean, Ohio State is just a factory for
just a wagon. It is. It's just a wagon, because then you add Carnell Tate on top of that. Anytime there's a question, you take the Ohio State wide receiver, because Brian Hartline was such a great position coach there for such a long time. And I'm kind of curious to see if that continues at Ohio State or if that changes. But yeah, that Ohio State team was just absolutely dynamite. And I think, look, it's easy for us from on the outside to kind of clown on Matt Patricia for the way it kind of all ended here in New England. But look, I think he's headed toward another head coaching job, whether it's Ohio State or in the pros. When you look at that resume that he's built, with the Buckeyes and with Ryan Day, it's really impressive.
Matty P was one of my favorites to be around. I do group him in that like Josh McDaniels category, where he is just an unbelievable coordinator. And I think that's like what he's great at. And I think, yeah, a lot of these guys, they want to be head coaches and have that title, right? Because there's so much weight that carries with that. But he is like, if he ever was to take a coordinator position, like at defense, like anyone would be lucky to have him, just because when he puts all of his energy and time into trying to stop an opposing offense, it's a problem. Like it really is. And you could, speaks for itself in the way that these kids are getting drafted out of Ohio State.
So if Ohio State loses Ryan Day to an NFL job, and I'm not saying that's imminent or anything, would we see Matt Patricia as the head coach at Ohio State? Although, and you bring up a great point, and you make the great connection with Josh, and it's not necessarily a character flaw, but some guys are just really good coordinators as opposed to being head coaches.
Yeah, it's not a character flaw at all. I think that they're both, like, both those guys are tremendous coaches. It's just when you take a head coaching job, you can only devote so much of your time to one side or the other, and you kind of you got to coach an entire football team, and it's not easy to do. It's not. And when you're a coordinator and you have all this time and energy and you can focus just on one side of the ball, I just think that when you give them that opportunity, they crush it. They really do.
All right, the last question for me before we wrap up. Have we taken another step forward in the journey of A.J. Brown to Foxborough? The Eagles they traded up, and they used their first-round pick. Howie Roseman used his first-round pick last night on Mekhi Lemon, a wide receiver out of USC. Really one of my favorite wide receivers in the draft. Really smart, tough, physical, fearless, going over the middle, great yak, all the boxes. But this begs the question, are the Eagles preparing for life in a post-A.J. Brown world? And again, have we taken another step toward A.J. Brown bringing his talents to New England?
Yeah, I mean, all signs are pointing towards that, right? I mean, I think everyone's talking about it. I think what it's going to come down to is, what are we willing to give up for AJ, right? I think that's the question that is just so unknown at this point. And I think that you really have to think, I know Elliott and the staff are probably doing a lot of, they're putting everything together that they can and trying to come up with as many scenarios as they can to try to get him in the building, which I think would be a great addition to have a veteran receiver in there. It's just like, what are you willing to give up for that position? And is that going to hurt you in the long term if you give up too much, or it doesn't pan out and it doesn't work out the way, like, I guess, like, those are unknowns. You have no idea. I mean, AJ is a good player, and he's been healthy and available, so you would got to imagine that it would be the same kind of situation in New England. And he's a hard worker. It's just, what are you willing to give up for that player, and is that going to benefit your team long term, right? Because I think there always has to, whatever decision is being made in the offseason, I think you're always conscious about, like, next year a little bit, right? And because there's always this constant trying to build the best team every single year. And if you put yourself in a position where you don't have draft picks, or you don't have the ability to get the guys that you want or need, right, in the different positions, then that hurts you that year, right? Just because you gave up so much for something, right? But again, we could replay this back in a year from now and say, AJ Brown, had 90 catches and 1,100 yards, and, like, who cares what we gave up for him, because he went out there and produced, right? Like, we don't know. It's tough.
You know what number he wears, right?
Is he 15? He's not a 15 guy, is he?
No,
he's 11. He's 11.
11. Now,
he's
we
11.
talked a lot about Rob Gronkowski and number 87 and Romeo Dobbs. How does Edelman feel, you think?
Let me put myself in Jules' shoes real quick. You know what? I think at the end of the day, there's going to be a moment in time where that number may or may not get retired, right? I think for the decisions that he made, that was always, the best for the team, and he stayed in New England. He never wanted to move. He was Patriot, he was a Patriot for life, right? He retired as one. His career was I mean, nothing short of amazing of what he was able, where he came from, what he was able to accomplish in his career. That being said, I think that Jules would just be, he would be proud for somebody else, like a guy like that, that's going to come in and play hard and wear that 11 like pretty proudly. I think that Jules would be okay with it. I
Right.
do. I think that he would be. I think that he would welcome another 11 onto the fields. I'm sure he would love it to be retired so no one else could touch it. But if it was a guy like AJ Brown, it's like, listen, that number, did a lot of great things for this organization. So like represent, you know. And I think that AJ could step up to the task of that.
I like your philosophy that you mentioned when we talked about Gronk and number 87. You said Gronk can't be defined by
Yeah,
the number, and it's just that the legacy is so much deeper. And I think there's something to that with Edelman. So
yeah,
we'll see.
100%.
We'll see.
100%.
Look, it's we could be. I think that the magic date now is June 1st, where the money gets a lot easier to swallow. If you're the Philadelphia Eagles, you make that trade after June 1st, you get a second, and both sides move on.
Yep.
Chris Hogan, thank you very much for your time. We have 2 more days of the NFL draft, and then we'll reconnect again next week, and we'll be able to figure out where this team is, if they're better than they were when they left the field at Super Bowl 60, if they're about the same. I think we're trending in a direction here where you get a left tackle, you figure out a way to get AJ Brown, and then maybe you get a pass rusher here in the next couple days.
Yeah.
And you can make an argument that they're better than they were when
100%.
they left the field at the end of Super Bowl 60.
Absolutely.
Sounds good, my friend. Take care, and we'll talk soon.
All right, Chris. Thanks.